Hello, and welcome to Stories from India, a podcast where we talk about myths, legends, and folk tales from India. I'm your host, Narad Muni, and I'm a mythological character myself. I have the gift of eternal life and knowledge of the past, the present, and the future. By profession, I'm a traveling musician and a storyteller. So the way I'm doing my job is by podcast. This week, we are back into the Ramayan. We have done about 7 episodes of the Ramayan so far. If you haven't heard them before, I do recommend you check them out. If not, here's a summary. Ram was the oldest son of Dashrath, the king of Ayodhya. He was meant to succeed him. And everything was going according to plan. Until Kaikeyi, one of Dasharath's queens, stepped in and changed everything. She wanted her own son, Bharat, to rule instead. And so she cashed in on a couple of unconditional promises that Dasharath had given her. Ram was sent into exile for 14 years. Ram, his wife Sita, and his brother Lakshman left Ayodhya. All this while Bharat wasn't even around. He had no idea all this was happening. This was sort of like pulling the goalkeeper off of the football field when their substitute wasn't even at the stadium. The spectators loudly booed the decision. Quite rightly so. But that didn't have any effect on Kaikeyi. The spectators wanted to walk off with Ram, but Ram implored them to stay and finish the game and cheer on his brother. He did promise to return in just 14 years. That's where we pick up the story today. Having said tearful goodbyes to the people of Ayodhya, the trio of Ram, Lakshman, and Sita headed south, and a day or two later officially exited the kingdom. Passport control and immigration checks were a lot easier than they are these days, which is to say, they just did not exist. But there was an official from court to record their departure. The three of them stood just outside the borders of their home, looking at the dark forest that lay ahead. Lakshman asked, "Do you think there are asurs in the forest?" "I'm sure there are," said Ram, "and Rakshas and beasts." "Asurs!" cried Lakshman. "Rakshas!" cried Sita. "And beasts, oh my!" exclaimed the court official behind them. Ram and Lakshman had been in a forest before. See episode 16, 16 Flags. But they had less to fear then, because they had been accompanied by Vishwamitra, the world's friend, who, ironically, also had the power to destroy it. Lakshman was understandably nervous. He had not particularly enjoyed the last trip. What with the whole battle with the invisible shape-shifting demon who threw boulders at them. He asked, "Why don't we just pitch camp here, right here outside the border?" Ram pulled out his copy of the contract he had signed with Kaikeyi and muttered, whereas party of the first part, burden of proof. Okay, got it. Here it is. We have to be in a forest no less than 100 miles from the Ayodhya border. So the trio had to walk on, entering unfamiliar territory. This first forest was quite uneventful actually. But on the other side, they came upon the river Ganga. It was in full flow. There was no way they could swim across. As they looked around, a chap came along. It isn't normal to run into a random stranger and find out they are the local king. But this was exactly that kind of a situation. It was Guha, a king or a chief of his local tribe. When he found out who they were, he was more than happy to commission a boat to get Ram, Lakshman, and Sita safely across. And he did it for free. They walked along the Ganga and finally came upon a hill called Chitrakoot. There were lots of fruit trees here, and the landscape was full of wildflowers. There were little streams, a few waterfalls, a very pleasant place to set up camp. Just the kind of place that might have gotten the trio singing Hakuna Matata. They were far enough from Ayodhya that they built a hut and lived by the banks of the river Mandakini. All was well for many days and weeks, until one day, in the distance, there was something. It seemed like a whole army was coming there. Lakshman looked through a telescope. "It's Bharat!" he screamed. "He's here with an army! Bharat's going to attack us!" But wait, something's not right. As the huge army got closer and Bharat and Shatrughna stepped off of their elephants, it became clear why. Bharat was not wearing battle armor or fatigues. He was wearing rags, just like Ram, Lakshman, and Sita. Bharat and Shatrughna did not look happy. Bharat quickly explained why. It was because Dasharath had died. He had passed away crying out for Ram, just like Shravan's parents had said he would. "Wait, did you know about that?" asked Ram. "No," said Bharat sorrowfully. "I've only just caught up now to episode 24 of Narad Muni's podcast. If I had known before, I could have spoken to Kaikeyi about it and stopped her." "Kaikeyi? Don't you call her mummy anymore?" asked Lakshman. "I've disowned her," Bharat replied. Sita chimed in. "But Bharat, if you and Shatrughna are here and father is no more, Queen Mother Kaikeyi is no longer a queen and no longer a mother, who's minding the shop?" "Sumantra is, for the moment. But don't worry, he's not power hungry. Besides, I've set up a sunset clause." "I've been taught well," he said, nodding towards Ram. "It took a while to find you three, though. Luckily, I ran into a king who insisted on giving the entire army a ride across the river Ganga. With just one boat, though, it's taking a while." "You mean it took a while?" asked Ram. "No. The 51st Battalion is being transported across as we speak. They'll join us here unless we make the substitution quick, and the others won't even have to cross." "What substitution are you talking about?" asked Ram. "Us, of course," replied Bharat. "Didn't you wonder why I'm wearing rags like you? I'm your substitute. The moment I found out everything that had happened, I knew I couldn't rule Ayodhya. That job is yours alone. I'll be in exile for you." "Little brother, I'm afraid the rules are quite clear," replied Ram. "You can't substitute back in someone who's been substituted out." "But I'd be substituting you in exile. You wouldn't be substituting me on the throne." "No, the contract and the laws are very clear. Even more important is that I made a promise to Dasharath and Kaikeyi. I cannot back out of that. They discussed this topic a lot more. Meanwhile, the 52nd archers had just finished crossing the Ganga. Finally, Bharat and Ram reached an agreement. Bharat would not sit on the throne. He would rule, but in Ram's name only. Kinda like how the British Civil Service claims to execute orders on behalf of Her Majesty the Queen. Bharat would do that. He'd administer on Ram's behalf. And at the end of 14 years, Ram would return and be given the throne that he had occupied in absentia. To seal the deal, Bharat took away Ram's one good pair of shoes. Oh well, Lakshman could help make another pair. If Bharat was keen on placing Ram's shoes on the throne, he could have offered an exchange rather than merely taking away what Ram did have. A pretty sight it was. Bharat with well-shod feet, carrying Ram's shoes on his head towards Ayodhya, while a barefoot Ram patiently waited for Lakshman to source appropriate raw material and to shape it for his feet. "Hey, brother," Lakshman said, "did you know your left foot is 8 millimeters shorter than the right one, but is wider by 1.8 millimeter toe joints?" Bharat would put the shoes on the throne as a symbol of whom the kingdom really belonged to. "Do please wash them first," Sita had reminded. Ram can't sit on a dirty throne, even if that's 14 years away. The one thing Ram couldn't talk Bharat out of was his diet. Bharat insisted on eating fruits and nuts, which is about all that was available near Ram's hut in Chitrakoot. Reluctantly, Bharat, Shatrughna and the entire army walked away, back to Ayodhya. After they had left, Ram couldn't bear to remain in Chitrakoot. The place always reminded him of his emotions when he heard that Dasharath died. He had to escape from that. Besides, he had heard of another place, Panchavati. He explained it to Lakshman and Sita, who both agreed to try it out. That's all for now. Ram, Lakshman and Sita are going to have lots of adventures in Panchavati, including a lady who would really like to be Ram's friend. And of course, the kidnapping that is at the heart of the Ramayan. A couple of notes on the show. Chitrakoot, just like Ayodhya, is a real place in India. Check out the pictures I've linked. Though the place does look a lot different from Ram's time. The previous 7 Ramayan episodes are all linked in the show notes. Do check them out if you haven't already. That's all for this week. If you have comments or suggestions, please leave a comment or a review on the site sfipodcast.com or tweet at sfipodcast. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get notified automatically of new episodes. And thanks to all you listeners for your continued support and your feedback. The music is from purpleplanet.com. That's purple-planet.com. In the next mini episode, we'll meet a demon. He was actually Vishnu's son before he went rogue. Besides doing regular conquering stuff, he kidnapped 16,000 women and stole the earrings of a goddess. See you later.